And welcome to City Beat. I'm your host, Jaret Schneider, and joining me today by phone is Deputy Mayor Erin Hogan. Thanks for joining me today, Erin.
Hi, Jaret. I'm glad to be able to call in.
Hi, and before we jump into the questions, I'll give you a minute or two to run down anything you want to mention first.
Well, you know what? I was hoping that we could probably have some discussion around a couple of events that I've been able to participate in. I've logged a couple of miles, and last week I was in Ottawa for the FCM board meeting and advocacy days, and so that's when the FCM board, I guess, we storm the Hill en masse and meet with as many MPs and ministers as we can to talk to them about municipal priorities. And right now, the reason I'm joining you by phone is because I'm calling in from Winnipeg. I'm at the Association of Manitoba Municipalities annual meeting at the Convention Centre, and I've also been joined here by a councillor, Robinson, and Mayor Johnson and City Manager Sepitelli. So we've been doing the same thing, lobbying on behalf of Thompson to provincial ministers and members.
So, Erin, you said you've been doing a lot of traveling lately. You've been to Ottawa and Winnipeg for a couple of different things. Before we get into your journey to Winnipeg, you were in Ottawa for the FCM annual Advocacy Days meetings. Could you give us a little bit of background on FCM and what it is?
Sure thing. Well, FCM is a organization for municipalities across Canada, and we have about 2,000 members, and that's big urban centers, small rural municipalities from coast to coast to coast, all provinces, all three territories. And so the membership, what we say, we represent Canada, and so FCM has been working hard to lobby the federal government to actually work with municipalities. In the past, the message that we've heard from the federal government is, no, we don't work with you directly. You're creatures of the province. Go talk to the province. But we've been really making some headway into that, to having that working relationship and working together. And so we've seen that with the gas tax transfer and the Build Canada Fund that was a part of the economic stimulus package a couple of years ago. And so FCM has been quite successful in actually engaging the federal government in terms of having resources transferred to municipalities. And so the representation that I am a part of is Manitoba gets 5 people to sit on that board, to be a part of the executive of that organization. And so I represent Manitoba municipalities at that level, and I'm one of 5. And so I think that it's really important with our 5. We have the president of AMM. We have an automatic spot for a councillor from Winnipeg, but then we have 3 members at large, and the 2 other members come from rural Manitoba. And so I think that it's really important to get that northern perspective in there from the voice of Thompson and northern Manitoba. So I bring that to the table, and we have a really solid team, and we do a really good job for municipalities in Manitoba and across the country.
204-677-8181. Taking your calls to Deputy Mayor Erin Hogan, 204-677-8181. What types of things were brought up at the meeting in Ottawa?
Well, in Ottawa specifically, FCM has been lobbying for a long-term infrastructure plan. In the federal budget in 2011, the government committed to work with FCM on this long-term infrastructure plan and developing what that is going to look like. And so in terms of information that we bring to the feds, we tell them, municipalities, we bring in our resources relying on a regressive property tax system. We actually, out of the whole tax dollar, the taxpayer doesn't care if it's the municipal government, the federal government, the provincial government. A tax is a tax is a tax. But municipalities collect only 8 cents of every tax dollar, and we are actually responsible for over 60% of the public infrastructure across Canada. So you can see how that burden is distributed unevenly. So we want to talk to them about long-term funding, about how to make sure that resources are going to municipal priorities appropriately. And so that's a part of the development of a long-term infrastructure plan that's not just 5 years here, 5 years there, but looking actually long-term, 20 years plus.
Oh, wow. 204-677-8181. What things did you bring to the national table from Thompson?
From Thompson? Well, Thompson is actually in this unique position where we are participating in programs that FCM is running. As I've mentioned before, I'm not sure if people are aware, I actually chair a committee of the FCM board, and that's the Increasing Women's Participation in Municipal Government Standing Committee. And we receive funding through Status Women Canada to implement programs. And Thompson is participating as a pilot community in the Protégé program, which is a mentorship program for young women to pair up with municipal councillors and learn about government. And that is actually to enhance one of the priorities set by the Board of Directors to increase women's participation in municipal government. We're finding that across the nation, we have about 24-25% of municipal representatives that are women, and that falls below the 30% mark noted by the United Nations that says that unless councils have 30% at least representation by women, that women's priorities aren't being reflected in the development of government and public policy.
Okay, 204-677-8181. What were some of the problems or concerns maybe with infrastructure in the other parts of Canada that were brought up at the meeting that maybe we do a little bit better here in Thompson?
Well, you know what? I think that's actually a very interesting question. When we're talking about how to develop a long-term infrastructure plan for municipalities across Canada, we recognize that there are regional differences. The challenges that are happening in metropolitan Vancouver are very different than the challenges that are happening in northern Manitoba. And so we want to make sure that any type of long-term infrastructure plan that's put in place has that flexibility for regional variation. I mean, you look at Thompson, for example, and we have shorter construction seasons. We may need to tender a project and have a waiting period for companies to actually be able to bid on it or be able to put it in the queue of projects that they have going on. So we need that flexibility, and especially in the north, FCM has been very supportive of the territories in terms of needing that flexibility for, instead of per capita funding, having base plus. But we're making the argument that those conditions also exist in the northern parts of the provinces. So there needs to be flexibility.
204-677-8181. We have the Deputy Mayor on the phone. 204-677-8181. You mentioned that you are in Winnipeg now as well. Can you give me a little bit of background on it and what you're doing there?
So currently I'm at AMM, which is our provincial association for municipalities. And they do similar work that FCM does, but in terms of lobbying the provincial government. So I have been joined by Councillor Robinson and Mayor Johnson, as I mentioned, and we've been meeting with ministers to advocate on behalf of Thompson and just the priorities that Thompson has. But also, part of the value of coming to these events, I know that people can get concerned about the travel and the cost associated with it, but I view it in terms of an investment. It's important for Thompson to be represented at these types of events so that we can network with other municipalities. Just the other day, we were approached by a councillor from Swan River, I believe, to talk to us about the Municipal Revenue Act and how Thompson has been successful with that in terms of generating revenue outside of the property tax source and putting it into reserve for capital projects, and how we've managed that over the years. And so just in terms of being able to share best practices and learn from each other, I think that there's incredible value in being present at these types of functions.
204-677-8181. So how come you guys are in Winnipeg? What are the reasons for these specific meetings?
Well, in particular, we met with Minister Lemieux on Monday morning, and he is the Minister of Local Government. And so meeting with that minister, we are able to talk about some of our specific issues, especially in terms of policing and the cost of policing in Thompson. But also, as council is going through the budgetary process, we are recognizing that there are a number of responsibilities that should fall on the provincial shoulders that Thompson taxpayers are actually picking up. And so we are making the argument that's not a fair system, and that the province should actually be bearing those costs. In particular, the cost of RCMP, which is over and above what taxpayers in Steinbeck pay or Portage to Prairie, but also the social assistance grant, which we've noted through the budgetary process that Thompson taxpayers are picking up and should actually be a responsibility of the province.
So what types of responses are you getting from the provincial government on these topics?
Well, of course. I mean, they've announced too that they're running deficit budgets, and that the balancing of the budget is going to be delayed for a period. And that's a story that's happening across Canada with these economic times. Budgets are tight, and unfortunately, or fortunately, depending which way you look at it, municipalities, we don't run deficit budgets. We balance our budgets every year. And so when we tell the province that this is actually your responsibility, Thompson taxpayers shouldn't be picking up the tab, that's not a message that they want to receive. So we're gonna have to work together on it and how we figure it out. But we strongly believe that this is a message that the provincial government should be receiving and should be picking up.
Absolutely. 204-677-8181. The new Protégé program has started up, and I believe you have 2 people registered in the program. So first of all, what is the Protégé program, and how did it come about?
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, it is funded through Status of Women Canada and implemented through SVM. So they actually modeled the program after a program in Toronto, a highly successful program in Toronto, of pairing up young women with counselors to get them exposure in leadership and government and municipal politics. And the reason for that was that they were noticing that this type of behavior of mentorship, it generally happened with their male colleagues, and it was something that they were noticing that the diversity of mentorship wasn't really there, whether it was women or immigrants or the LGBT community, that there needed to be some type of systematic approach to providing those mentorship opportunities for these non-traditional groups. And so it was a highly successful program in Toronto, and FCM viewed it and they said, you know what, is this program something that can only exist in Toronto, or can we make it work in smaller communities? Can we make it work in northern communities and rural communities? And so FCM submitted a proposal to Status Women Canada, which was granted, and then FCM went out to their membership and asked for communities that may be interested in participating as a pilot community. And so Thompson submitted interest, and we were selected based on our northern and remote status, which is, I find that a little bit humorous, but when you look at communities across Canada, we fall under that title, but also for our high Aboriginal population. FCM is interested in finding ways to get Aboriginal applicants interested in the Protégé program. And so we were accepted into that program, and FCM staff actually came to Thompson and interviewed community groups and put together tools so that we could implement the program locally. So we are able to have this program without putting a cost on the city of Thompson or Thompson taxpayers. And so I think that is a win-win situation. We're able to access these resources and have young women who are interested actually play a part. And the idea is to nurture those leadership skills, but also to allow people to see municipal government for what it is. We had one of our protégés come to council a couple weeks ago, and that was her first time in City Hall. And so just being able to enhance that exposure, I think everybody wins. I mean, the community wins, and even though it's a pilot year, we really are hoping that we are able to expand the program, maybe open it up to young men in subsequent years, get more participation from council, and have it go forward on an annual basis.
Yeah, it really is a great program. We're running a little bit low on time, but before we go, I'll give you a minute or two to wrap things up with any final messages.
Any final messages? I just want to thank you for having me on the show today, and I want to extend my thanks to Thompson residents for supporting me on council and for supporting me on FCM. We do great work, and I know that there's sometimes there's the question of travel and the expense, but I really truly do believe that it is worth the investment for Thompson to be at these tables and for us to be able to share our message and to get that feedback and those best practices. And Thompson has these best practices too in terms of our Municipal Revenue Act and just programs that we've implemented. But I do want to just share the message that over the past year, AMM, the Association of Manitoba Municipalities, has been picking up the tab for FCM board members to go to board meetings throughout the year. And so that is no longer a responsibility of Thompson taxpayers, and so I think that has been a progressive move and something that enables us to maintain that presence on the federal table. So again, thank you for having me, and I hope to be back sometime soon.
All right, thanks again, Erin, for joining us. That will do it for City Beat this week. I'm Jaret Schneider. I would just like to thank you again, Deputy Mayor Hogan, for joining us today.
No problem.
Make sure to tune in every Thursday at 11:30 for City Beat and information from your municipal government. And to all the residents, have a great rest of your Thursday.
City Beat will be back next Thursday morning at 11.